I woke up to the faint hum of a refrigerator and a ceiling I didn't recognize. My mouth tasted like regret and cheap tequila. When I moved my hand, something cold slipped against my skin, a silver ring that definitely wasn't mine. I blinked hard until the blur cleared. And there it was. A heavy class ring engraved with the initials C. E. My stomach turned before I even looked around. Cole Everett was asleep on the floor, one arm thrown over a blanket, still wearing yesterday's flannel. The same logo that was printed across my shirt, Everett Construction, was stitched above his pocket. I tried to move quietly, but the bed springs betrayed me. He opened his eyes, rubbed them once, and said, "You feeling human yet?" I stared at him and croaked, "Why am I wearing your shirt? And your ring?" He pushed himself up, voice rough from exhaustion. "You wouldn't stop spinning your phone last night. Kept saying you needed to call Lucas. So I gave you the ring to fidget with. You refused to give it back." His words came out careful, like he was stepping through broken glass. "You were pretty clear about thinking it was prettier than anything he ever gave you." I looked at the ring again, the metal catching morning light. And every memory of last night hit at once: the music, the door I shouldn't have opened, the shock that froze me solid. Cole ran a hand through his hair and added softly, "June's in the guest room. She stayed over to make sure you weren't alone." I nodded without speaking, throat tight. My voice finally came out in a whisper. "I saw them. Cole, Lucas and Sierra. Together." He didn't ask how bad it was. He just said, "I know." And the way his eyes softened told me he'd known long before I did. The call came just as I finished forcing down a piece of toast. Lucas's name lit up my screen like a curse. And before I could decide whether to ignore it, my thumb betrayed me. His voice burst through, sharp and rehearsed. "You really embarrassed me last night, Amelia." Everyone was watching. "You need to apologize to Sierra." I let out a small laugh that sounded more like disbelief than humor. "Apologize? To the woman I caught half naked on top of you?" He exhaled loudly, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "You know, Sierra's like family. She was helping me calm down before the set. You always twist things." "I know." Cole was pouring coffee across the room, eyes fixed on the counter, jaw tight. I kept my tone steady. "You think I'm twisting things? You had your pants around your ankles." "Lucas." He ignored that, his voice lowering into that familiar condescension. "You've always been jealous of her. That's your problem. You can't handle me having female friends." I looked at the ring still on my finger and said quietly, "Friends don't look at each other like that." Lucas scoffed. "You're being dramatic again. If you'd been more supportive of my music, maybe we wouldn't be in this mess." I stared at the wall and whispered, "Your music isn't what's broken here." Cole turned, coffee forgotten, and watched me while I ended the call without another word. The silence afterward felt heavier than the ring on my hand. Then June's voice came from the hallway, half amused, half furious. "Did he just tell you to apologize for catching him cheating?" I nodded once, and she shook her head. "Men like that think shame is a currency. They spend it on everyone but themselves." Cole's eyes softened. "You don't owe him a single sentence," he said quietly. And for the first time in 2 years, I believed it. The phone sat face down on the table, buzzing one last time before it went still. And in that stillness, I realized I didn't care what Lucas wanted anymore. June leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, her voice too calm for the words that followed. "You know he's been sleeping with her for months, right? Cole found out 6 months ago." My breath caught midair. "What?" I turned to Cole, and he looked like someone caught holding a truth too heavy to keep. June didn't flinch. "He didn't tell you because he didn't want to look like he was trying to break you two up. The room went still except for the sound of my pulse in my ears. So everyone knew but me, I said, not sure if it was anger or humiliation burning hotter. Cole's voice was low, steady. Not everyone, just me. I didn't know how to tell you without it sounding like I wanted something from you. Is not a. I laughed once. Sharp enough to sting. Something from me? You think being my emergency driver and therapist gets you points? He shook his head. I didn't do it for points. I just didn't want to see you hurt again. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And said, then you failed. The words hit harder than I meant them to. And for a second he almost said something, then stopped himself. June broke the silence first. He's been protecting you in his own stupid way. You might hate him for it, but at least hate him for trying. 2. I sank into the chair, feeling the weight of that ring again, and whispered, I thought I was crazy, but I wasn't. Cole crouched beside me, elbows on his knees. You were never crazy. He just made you feel that way. His voice cracked on the last word. Quiet but sure. I met his eyes and said, you could have told me. Cole. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I should have. There was nothing else to add. The truth was already there, sitting between us like a bruise that would take time to fade. But at least it was finally visible. Cole's eyes met mine. And for a second, everything blurred into a memory I hadn't invited. I saw myself standing at the airport last spring, suitcase in hand, waiting under those fluorescent lights while messages from Lucas kept switching from on my way to something came up. Cole had shown up an hour later, holding 2 coffees and an apologetic smile. Guess he forgot again, he'd said, handing me one. I remember snapping. He's just busy. And him replying quietly, he's always busy when it's you. Guys. The memory vanished as quickly as it came, leaving the same hollow ache in its place. I looked back at Cole and said, you were always there when he wasn't. He shook his head. I was there because someone had to be. I exhaled slowly. I kept telling myself he'd get better, that if I just tried harder, he'd remember how to love me. Cole's voice dropped to a whisper. You didn't need to be better. He needed to be honest. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I leaned back in the chair, fingers tracing the rim of the coffee mug. I loved a man who treated loyalty like background noise, I said quietly. Cole's gaze didn't waver. No. You loved the version of him you thought might still exist. My chest tightened at the thought that I had built an entire future out of maybes and promises that never belonged to me. He didn't move closer or look away, just stayed there long enough for the silence to turn into something almost gentle. And in that stillness, I finally admitted to myself that what I'd been mourning wasn't him, it was the illusion I'd helped create. Cole drove while I stared out the window, rehearsing a version of calm that didn't feel real. When we reached the apartment, Sierra opened the door wearing one of Lucas's shirts, smirking like she'd been waiting for this scene. He said you'd come back once you'd cooled off, she said, leaning against the frame. I handed her the spare key and asked, where are my things? Her smile widened. He already dropped them at your place. He figured you'd realize what you were giving up. I tilted my head. What exactly am I giving up? She crossed her arms. A guy who knows how to have fun. Not some uptight accountant who kills the vibe. Accepted. Before I could answer, Lucas appeared behind her, still half asleep and confident. You're here. So I guess you came to apologize, he said. Like it was obvious. I looked him straight in the eye. No. I came to give back the only key you'll ever have to my life. He laughed. The sound hollow. You'll regret this. Amelia, you always overreact. I stepped closer until I could smell the stale beer on his breath. Overreacting is what women do when men mistake their silence for forgiveness. He blinked, thrown off by the calm in my voice. And Cole's presence behind me filled the silence he couldn't handle. Lucas scoffed and grabbed a garbage bag from the corner. "You want your junk? Here. Don't say I never gave you anything." Sierra snorted behind him, whispering something about me being dramatic. Cole picked up the bag before I could. His voice even. "We're done here." Lucas muttered something about me being ungrateful. But I didn't turn back. On the way down the stairs, Cole said quietly, "You okay?" I nodded, gripping the ring on my finger. He treated everything like it was disposable. I said softly, "I just made sure he knew I wasn't, Brooke called the next morning while I was sorting through the last of the bags Lucas had dumped on my doorstep. Her voice was sharp with disbelief. "Did you know he's telling people you cheated on him with Cole?" I froze mid-sentence, my fingers still on a wrinkled blouse. "He's what?" She sighed. "He's rewriting the whole thing. Says you were sneaking around behind his back for months." People from the venue heard it. My chest tightened, but I forced a laugh. "That's convenient. The man caught red-handed gets to play the victim." She hesitated. "You might want to speak up, Amelia. Otherwise, that story's going to stick." 2. Cole was fixing a loose hinge on my kitchen cabinet when I told him. He set the screwdriver down slowly. "He's spreading that?" I nodded. "Brooke says he's making it sound like we've been together all along." His jaw clenched. He can't just lie his way out of this. I gave a bitter smile. Lucas doesn't tell lies. He builds them. Cole met my eyes. "Then maybe it's time you stop letting him be the author." I looked at the phone still in my hand and said, "Maybe you're right." 2. That night, I opened my social media page and typed a single line. I didn't cheat. I just stopped believing someone who did. It was short. Clean. Vinyl. Within minutes. Messages flooded in friends. Co-workers. Even one of Lucas's bandmates saying they'd seen everything long before I did. Brooke texted again. A smile in her words. Now that's the version people will remember. I stared at the screen as notifications kept coming. Each one proof that truth had its own kind of momentum. Lucas could keep rewriting history all he wanted. I had just published the ending. Cole called a week later and asked if I wanted to see his office. "It's nothing fancy," he said. "Just where I hide from the world." I agreed. Mostly because the quiet of my apartment had started to feel too heavy. When I walked in, the smell of sawdust and coffee hit me first. And then I saw the blueprints spread across the tables. He introduced me to his business partner, Jasper, and Jasper's wife, Evelyn, who handled their books. Evelyn smiled, hugged me like we'd known each other for years, and said, "He talks about you a lot." "You know," Cole looked embarrassed. "Ignore her," he muttered. But Evelyn only winked. Later, when she handed me a cup of coffee, she said quietly, "He's loved you for 2 years. I thought you should hear it from someone who's not him." My heart caught off guard. 2 years? She nodded. "Since the first time he saw you wait for Lucas at that bar. He told Jasper you looked like someone who deserved better." I stood there, unsure what to do with that kind of truth. When Cole walked back in, I pretended nothing had happened. But Evelyn's words kept echoing. "On the drive home," I finally said, "Evelyn told me something." He glanced over. Cautious. "Yeah?" I hesitated. Then smiled a little. "That you're terrible at hiding how you feel." He groaned softly. And I caught his reflection in the window. "I was going to tell you," he said. But timing's never been on my side. I looked at the ring on my hand, the one that had accidentally started it all, and said, "Maybe it is now." He didn't answer, just reached over and turned up the radio. The silence between us changing into something warm instead of empty. We met for dinner at a small Italian place downtown. The kind with flickering candles and silverware that didn't match. Cole looked nervous, folding his napkin again and again until I finally asked, "Are you okay?" He smiled. "A little too tight. Evelyn told me she said something to you." I set my fork down. "She did. She said you've been in love with me for 2 years." His eyes met mine, unflinching now. She shouldn't have said it. But yeah, it's true. I let the words settle before answering. "You should have told me." He laughed softly. "You were with him. I didn't want to be another man who made you doubt yourself." I stared at him, feeling the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. "You know what's funny?" I said finally. "You've done more for me without saying a word than he did in 2 years of talking." Cole leaned forward, his voice steady. "That's because I didn't want to fix you. I just wanted you to stop apologizing for being exactly who you are." I felt something shift inside me. Not sudden or loud. Just real. I think I forgot what it feels like to be cared for without conditions. I whispered. He smiled, shaking his head. "You didn't forget. You just got used to the wrong definition." When we walked out into the night, he held the door but didn't try to take my hand. I caught his sleeve anyway. "So what now?" I asked quietly. He looked down at me, half smiling. "Now we start from kindness. Everything good comes from there." For the first time in a long time, I believed someone when they said something like that. The call came from a number I didn't recognize. But the moment I answered, his voice snapped through the line like static. "You just couldn't leave it alone." "Could you?" Lucas hissed. "You're ruining my reputation. Sierra's been crying for days." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my tone calm. "You managed to destroy your own reputation." "Lucas, I just stopped protecting it." He laughed, sharp and mean. "You always need to play the victim. I told everyone the truth. You and Cole were a thing long before I slipped up. They all know what kind of woman you are now." I could almost hear him smirking when he said it, like he still believed he owned the narrative. "Tell me something," I said quietly. "Do you actually believe the garbage that comes out of your mouth? Or do you just repeat it until you forget what really happened?" He went silent for a beat before snapping. "You'll regret talking to me like that." I smiled into the phone. "I already did. For 2 years straight." His breath caught. And then he spat. "You think you're better than me now? You're nothing without me." Cole looked up from across the room, sensing the tone in my voice. I met his eyes and said into the receiver, "Then it's a good thing I stopped being nothing the day I stopped being yours." It zerbelowed. Lucas started to speak again, but I hung up mid-sentence. The phone rang once more, then again, until it finally went quiet. Cole raised an eyebrow. "You done?" I nodded. "Completely." The air in the room felt lighter, like his voice had finally been evicted from it. For the first time in months, silence didn't sound like loss. It sounded like closure. A month later, Cole and I had dinner at the same restaurant where everything had quietly begun. He looked different that night, lighter, as if the pieces of both our lives had finally fallen back into place. When the plates were cleared, he reached across the table and said, "I've been thinking about that ring." I glanced down at it, the silver catching the dim light. "What about it?" He smiled. "Nervous, but sure. It's too big for you. I was going to take it to a jeweler. Have it resized. Properly yours. If you want it to be." I laughed softly. "You mean the same one I drunkenly stole from you?" He shook his head. "No. The one that somehow found its way home." The words landed in the space between us. Simple and steady. "Colo, I said quietly. You don't have to give me anything. He reached for my hand, thumb brushing the edge of the ring. It's not about giving you something. It's about keeping what's already right. I looked at him, at the ease in his face, and said, I used to think love was supposed to hurt before it felt real. He smiled faintly. And now? I traced the rim of the ring and whispered, now I think love just feels like peace. He squeezed my hand, and neither of us said anything else for a while. Outside, the city was quiet enough that I could hear my own breathing. Steady for the first time in years. When we stood to leave, he slipped his arm around me, and I didn't flinch from the closeness. The ring felt heavier now, but in a way that meant something new, like a promise that didn't need words to stay true. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself after losing someone who never truly saw you, know that starting over isn't failure, it's freedom. Share this with someone who needs that reminder today. And if you believe in quiet strength, stay a while and subscribe.